Hello, my name is Ethan Barrow, and today I'll be presenting on the topic of Rapa Nui's role in the development of Polynesian ritual architecture. I'm calling this report Isolation or Influence, and I apologize that I'm recording this on my cell phone off of my computer screen. I have had some technological issues. The traditional view of Polynesian migration has been that it was a west to east phenomenon, beginning in Taiwan about 2000 BC, and then ultimately making it to Hawaii in the north, New Zealand or Aotearoa in the south, and Easter Island, also known as Rapa Nui, to its indigenous inhabitants in the east. There is also new evidence to suggest that the Polynesians did make contact with South America. However, there was never a Polynesian settlement in South America. Rapa Nui is typically considered to have been very isolated and not very important on the broader Polynesian cultural scale, although very culturally rich in its own right. The leading researchers for this project were Paul Wallen and Helene Martinson-Wallen, and they developed a three-phase model in order to discuss how Polynesian ritual architecture developed. Phase one of this model lasted from 1000 to 1300, and it saw ritual activity basically just being associated with the actions of feasting and burial. And the places where these actions would have taken place were typically marked with an upright stone. And that was about the extent of ritual architecture. Phase two lasted from 1300 to 1600, and it saw a development of ritual architecture to be on a larger scale and to be more permanent. Two architectural elements that were seen during this time were the mare, these stone paved areas, and often they were lined with other stones, as you see here, and ahu, which were ritual stone platforms where offerings were given. Basically, it was a type of altar. The mare and the ahu ended up merging into one ritual piece of architecture, and evidence for that merger is first found, the earliest evidence we have found at least, is found on Rapa Nui, suggesting that the merger actually occurred on Rapa Nui first and then spread to other islands. Flipping that narrative, saying that Eastern Polynesia actually ended up being an innovator in ritual architecture. Phase three of the model lasted from 1350 to 1450, and it saw a dramatic increase in the size of ritual architecture. So what we saw earlier with the paved areas that were the mare, here's one right here, here's one right here. Here is the ahu. We see it has gotten to be much larger. And the moai statues, which are these famous Easter Island statues, are actually placed on top of the ahu. And we do find statues being placed on top of ahu on other Polynesian islands, suggesting that Rapa Nui was the innovator for this practice, and that through the Polynesian cultural network, trade network, etc., it made its way to other Polynesian islands. Here we see a ahu and moray on Tahiti, and we see it's also on a larger scale than previously. The popular media article that I chose for this topic was called Easter Island Was Not Isolated, New Study Reveals Rapa Nui's Role in Polynesian Culture. And here's a link to it right here. It challenges the traditional view that Polynesian culture spread from west to east, and rather it suggests that ritual architecture ended up spreading mostly from east to west. And it challenges that assumption that Rapa Nui was totally isolated by suggesting that elements of culture that began on Rapa Nui ended up spreading to Western Polynesia as well. I do wish that the article was more detailed in describing how these developments took place, rather than simply saying that they did occur. I wish it would be more in detail like the research article was. However, I do think it was accurate information and it was easily understandable for public audiences. The public media article contributes to the public's perception of archaeology. Basically, it demonstrates that archaeology is dynamic, that it challenges long-held views, and that it's exciting. This is an exciting topic. People are very interested in the moai statues of Easter Island, and we want to know why they were built, and this actually can give us some insight into perhaps why they were built as part of ritual architecture. In conclusion, it rewrites our understanding of the Polynesian cultural network. It offers insight into the purpose of moai, and it demonstrates that just because Rapa Nui was isolated, that it was distant from other islands, does not mean that it was isolated from the cultural network. Here are my references. I have tried to include websites for all pictures on their slides, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.